Let's not waste any time. Subscribe. Number 10. The Hangman. So, just think that you are being told your job is to execute people, but if you do it too quickly and humanely, you get fired. That's exactly what happened to hangmen in medieval Europe. The job of a hangman wasn't just to kill criminals, but to make them suffer as much as possible in front of a cheering crowd. A good hangman was one who botched the job on purpose. Therefore he had to make sure the condemned person strangled slowly instead of dying instantly from a broken neck. If you were too efficient and gave someone a quick death, the crowd would riot. You'd lose your position, aka get fired. Hangmen were paid extra to prolong the agony, sometimes even climbing on the victim's shoulders to make it worse. This wasn't some underground thing. It was an official public job with contracts and rules. The same society that went to church every Sunday paid people to torture others in the town square. Hangmen were social outcasts. They had to live outside city walls and weren't allowed in taverns or churches, but they were essential government employees. Today, we think of executioners as monsters, but back then, refusing the job could mean punishment itself. You didn't choose to become a hangman. You were forced into it, often because you were already a criminal or the son of a previous hangman. It was a hereditary curse passed down through families. Next time you think modern jobs are soul-crushing, remember there was once a profession where being good at your job meant deliberately causing maximum suffering. Number 9. The knocker-upper. Before alarm clocks existed, someone had to wake people up for work. And that someone was a real person with a very specific job title, the knocker-upper. These were mostly older women who walked the streets in industrial cities like London and Manchester in the 1800s and early 1900s. They were equipped with a long bamboo stick or a pea shooter. Their job? Tap on bedroom windows until the sleeping worker woke up. They had to be extremely precise. Factories fined workers for being late, so missing a knock could cost someone their daily wage. Knocker-uppers kept detailed schedules and knew exactly which window belonged to which worker. Some used soft mallets, others shot dried peas at windows. They charged about a penny a week per customer. The job required perfect timing and reliability. You'd wake up at 3 a.m. to start waking others, but the irony was that knocker-uppers themselves had no one to wake them. Therefore they relied on good sleep habits and sometimes each other in shifts. The profession died out in the 1920s when reliable alarm clocks became affordable, pretty similar to how creative workers are fired nowadays because of AI. I think I can do this with AI. Just come here. Paste this image. Type something. And boom. Oh yeah. Okay. Hit him. Wow, crazy moves. Damn. This is brilliant. Bruh. Let's get back to our story. For decades, thousands of people literally earned their living by preventing others from oversleeping. In some places, police officers moonlighted as knocker-uppers for extra income. Imagine being pulled over by a cop who also woke you up that morning. The job was surprisingly competitive. Knocker-uppers had regular routes and customers they guarded jealously. Losing a client meant losing income. Some even carried lanterns with their names painted on them as advertising. Number 8. The Professional Mourner. In many ancient cultures and even up to the Victorian era, if your funeral looked poorly attended, it was a massive social embarrassment. The solution? Hire professional mourners to cry at your funeral. These were usually women, who were paid to weep, wail, and dramatically express grief at funerals of people they'd never met. In ancient Egypt, Rome, and China, professional mourning was a respected profession. Mourners would tear their clothes, cover themselves in ashes, and beat their chests with genuine-looking emotion. Some were so skilled they could cry on command. In Victorian England, mutes were hired to stand silently at funerals looking somber. The more elaborate the mourning display, the higher your social status appeared. Rich families competed to have the most dramatic funerals. Professional mourners had different levels of service. You could hire basic weepers or premium ones who composed poetic laments about the deceased. In some cultures, like parts of Africa and the Middle East, professional mourning is still practiced today. These mourners preserve ancient traditions of emotional expression that modern society often suppresses. They weren't seen as fake. In cultures where public displays of grief were expected, they helped families fulfill social obligations when genuine mourners couldn't produce enough emotion. Imagine applying for this job. You'd need references proving your crying ability and emotional range. Some mourners specialized in different types of grief: loud wailing for tragic deaths, quiet sobbing for dignified ones. Number 7. The Sin Eater. In parts of England, Scotland, and Wales, up until the 19th century, when someone died, their sins needed to be dealt with. Enter the Sin Eater, a person paid to literally eat the sins of the dead. The ritual worked like this: food and drink were placed on the deceased's body or coffin. The sin eater would consume them, symbolically taking on all the dead person's sins so their soul could enter heaven unburdened. Sin eaters were usually poor people desperate for money. They were paid with just a small fee for this job, but the cost was social isolation. Once you became a sin eater, you were considered unclean. People avoided you, children ran away, and you were essentially excommunicated from society. Some sin eaters absorbed the sins of hundreds of people over their lifetime. The job combined elements of priest, scapegoat, and garbage disposal for spiritual waste. Families believed that without a sin eater, their loved one's soul would wander eternally. Sin eaters were seen as performing a necessary but cursed service. Many were alcoholics who used the payment for drink. The practice died out as religious views changed, but it survived in remote areas into the early 1900s. The last known sin eater died in 1906. He reportedly absorbed sins from thousands. Imagine carrying that spiritual burden. Every meal you ate as payment reminded you of someone else's moral failures. Yet, these people were essential to their community's understanding of death and salvation. Number 6. The Gong Farmer. Medieval and early modern cities had a serious waste problem. Human waste accumulated in cesspits beneath homes, and as you'd imagine, someone had to clean them out. That someone was the Gong Farmer. But what the hell is gong? Gong was a polite term for human excrement. Gong farmers worked exclusively at night because the smell was so overwhelming. They descended into cesspits sometimes 20 feet deep, shoveling waste into barrels. The work was incredibly dangerous. Many died from toxic gases or drowning in waste. Others caught diseases that killed them slowly. Gong farmers were only allowed to work between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. They had to live outside city walls and weren't permitted to enter taverns or churches. Their clothes were burned regularly because nothing could remove the smell. Despite this, gong farming was relatively well paid because no one else wanted the job. Lots of gong farmers became wealthy. Some even bought properties. The waste they collected was sold as fertilizer to farmers. Cities literally depended on these men to prevent disease outbreaks. In London, hundreds of gong farmers worked nightly to keep the city habitable. The job required physical strength and the ability to hold your breath for long periods of time, and some of them even used primitive breathing apparatus. As indoor plumbing developed in the 19th century, gong farmers gradually disappeared. But for centuries, they were essential workers keeping medieval cities from drowning in their own waste. Would you do this job? Write down in the comments. Number 5. The Leech Collector. Before modern medicine understood bloodletting was mostly useless, leeches were used to treat everything from headaches to obesity. Someone had to supply millions of leeches to doctors. That someone was usually poor women known as leech collectors. They waded into ponds and marshes with bare legs, letting leeches attach themselves. Therefore they'd collect the engorged leeches into jars, but the work was painful and dangerous. Leeches could transmit infections, and collectors risked blood loss or drowning. That's why some used animal blood to attract leeches instead of their own bodies. Leech collecting was seasonal work, most active in spring and summer when leeches were plentiful, but collectors could earn decent money selling to apothecaries. At peak demand in the 1800s, France alone imported 80 million leeches annually. Leech collectors were mostly from rural poor communities. The job required knowledge of where leeches lived and how to handle them safely, therefore some collectors specialized in finding the highest quality medicinal leeches. As bloodletting fell out of favor and synthetic alternatives developed, leech collecting disappeared. Today, leeches are making a medical comeback for specific procedures, but they're now farm-raised in controlled environments. The women who once waded through swamps sacrificing their blood are largely forgotten. Number 4. The Water Carrier. In cities, before indoor plumbing, someone had to deliver water to homes. Water carriers transported water from public fountains or rivers to households that couldn't access it easily. They carried heavy wooden yokes with buckets hanging from each end. Some used carts or animals. The job required immense physical strength because carriers made multiple trips daily, climbing stairs in multi-story buildings. In hot climates, water carrying was essential for survival. Water carriers often developed distinctive physiques from years of carrying unbalanced loads, but in many cultures, water carrying was women's work. In parts of Africa and Asia, women still carry water long distances today. In medieval Europe, water carriers were regulated and licensed, therefore they had set prices and routes. Some cities had guilds of water carriers. The job could be profitable in wealthy areas where residents paid extra for convenience. Water quality was a constant concern. Carriers who sourced from cleaner fountains charged more. Some carriers specialized in delivering to specific clients like breweries that needed large quantities. As piped water systems developed in the 19th century, water carriers gradually vanished from cities, but in many parts of the world, traditional water carrying remains a daily reality. Before going to top 3, I would like to kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe. It helps me a lot. Number 3, the fuller. Before industrial textile processing, someone had to clean and thicken woolen cloth. That someone was the fuller, but their method was absolutely disgusting by modern standards. Fullers cleaned wool by soaking it in stale urine and treading on it with their bare feet for hours. The ammonia in urine helped remove oils and dirt from the wool. Fullers collected urine from public urinals or household chambers pots. Some even had signs requesting donations. The job was incredibly smelly and unpleasant, therefore fullers worked in designated areas outside city walls. Despite the stench, fulling was a respected trade organized into guilds. Master fullers oversaw large operations with multiple workers treading in huge vats. The rhythmic stomping created distinctive sounds heard throughout neighborhoods. Fullers developed strong legs from constant treading, some even used water mills with mechanical hammers later on, but foot fulling remained common for centuries. The job required knowledge of different urine strengths for different fabrics. As chemical alternatives were discovered, traditional fulling died out. The last foot fullers worked into the early 20th century in remote areas. Number 2, the whipper. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, some schools employed a professional whipper whose sole job was to beat students. This wasn't the teacher disciplining occasionally. This was a dedicated employee paid specifically to administer corporal punishment. Whippers were often former soldiers who knew how to inflict pain without causing permanent damage. They used birch rods or leather straps, therefore the job required precision. Too light, and the punishment was ineffective. Too severe, and parents complained. Whippers kept detailed records of punishments administered, but some schools had whipping schedules. Wealthy families sometimes hired private whippers for home tutoring. The position came with room and board plus salary, so you basically got paid to beat tiny humans. Whippers had authority over students, but were themselves low in social status. Many were illiterate but skilled in their craft. The job declined as educational philosophy changed in the 18th and 19th centuries. Progressive educators argued against corporal punishment, with some countries even banning it entirely. The last professional school whippers worked into the early 20th century in conservative institutions. Number 1, the Court Jester. We think of jesters as entertainers who told jokes and did tricks, but the real job of a court jester was much darker and more dangerous. Jesters were often the only people who could speak truth to power without losing their heads. The jester's costume and bells protected them. Kings believed harming a jester brought bad luck. Jesters used humor to criticize policies, point out corruption, and mock powerful courtiers that no one else dared touch. Some jesters were highly educated and served as unofficial advisors. They accompanied kings to war and diplomatic meetings. The best jesters were masters of wordplay who could insult someone devastatingly while making it seem like a joke. Many had physical or mental differences that made them objects of ridicule but also gave them unique perspectives. Some were dwarfs or had deformities. Others were exceptionally intelligent but chose the jester's role for protection. Famous jesters influenced major decisions, therefore some accumulated wealth and property. The job required walking a constant tightrope. One bad joke could mean death. Jesters who lost favor were sometimes executed, but as absolute monarchies declined, so did the role of court jesters. The last professional court jesters worked in the 18th century. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.